Hello, today we're making Zurich-style sliced meat with a Bernese Rösti. For this we need flour, butter, starchy potatoes, pepper, salt, veal, lemon, nutmeg, button mushrooms, shallots, oil, vermouth, white wine, cream and parsley. First, I cut the veal. I have a quick fry cut here. In this case it's a hip, but you can also use the loin, for example. And it's important that you get a piece from the butcher, because if you let the butcher slice it for you, he'll cut it into really super fine strips. And that's actually totally unsuitable for a Zürcher. Let me show you. This is a bit thicker. It can definitely be cut a bit thicker than a centimeter because it's veal. And veal can still be pink in the middle. It's not like pork, which really has to be cooked through. It can be pink. If it's sliced too thin, we lose the effect. It's cooked through and no longer as tender, unfortunately. So it should actually be a bit thicker. And then we'll cut it here now into large pieces. Then with the next ones, you'll see thicker strips. If a tendon remains attached, cut it off. And that's exactly the right thickness, because that way you'll manage to keep it a bit juicy in the middle. Next, we'll cut the mushrooms. I just brushed the dirt off the mushrooms a bit with a cloth, and now we'll cut them into slightly thicker slices, because they'll shrink a lot when frying. Don't cut them too thin, or you'll have almost nothing left. Should I just chop the parsley too? The stems are very thin, so plucking them would be a lot of work. If the stems are thicker, you can pluck off the leaves. But I always just cut off the stems at the bottom and then I chop up the rest a bit. Just gather it into a bundle and then slice it finely into strips a few times, chop over it once or twice, and that's enough. Next are the onions, or rather shallots, since they taste a bit more delicate. You can use a regular onion, but avoid large butcher's onions since their flavor isn't as delicate. Then cut them in half, then just slice them thinly as finely as possible. Don't even cut across, just now cut them into fine cubes. Let's move on to the starchy potatoes. Rösti comes in several varieties. The Swiss, for example, say it only works with a mix of half-cooked and half-raw potatoes. In my opinion, it also tastes great if you use only raw potatoes. You can just try it out for yourselves and see what you like best. That's what you should use, but feel free to give it a try. Only with raw potatoes, I now have a floury potato. It's better for Rösti since it holds together better than waxy potatoes and has a more interesting taste. Now I take a regular household grater and just use the coarse side of the grater and grate it coarsely. Be careful with your fingers to avoid injury. Now the potatoes are grated. Now I just spread them out a bit here on this tray. They're still very, very wet now, and I'll add a bit of salt directly to this mixture. The reason for that is that the salt draws out the water, and then we can squeeze it out more easily. Just season it well to start with. And we can add the pepper now as well. That's totally fine. Now next, this is now next thing. Also keep 2020. Now I'll take a bowl like this. Then I always take a handful of potatoes and squeeze them over the bowl. Squeeze them very hard to remove all the water from the potatoes. You'll soon see how much water comes out. So really put some muscle into it. Squeeze them so they get as dry as possible. That's important because then they'll get crispier. All the water must come out for them to get big. That's it, we can start frying now. Now I've set up two pans, one for the Rösti and one for the Zürcher, and now we'll start with the Rösti first. For that I add a bit of neutral oil to the pan, so no olive oil, that doesn't fit so well. A good splash of oil is needed if you want potatoes to get nice and big. And now we add the whole mixture. And now I take a slotted spoon and press the mixture down a bit in the pan. So that this potato mixture is evenly thick everywhere. Now lower the heat and fry slowly. The slower you fry the potatoes, the crispier they'll be. Also, what you must not forget is that we are using raw potatoes. The potato also needs some time to cook through. That's why we have to cook them slowly, so to speak, because otherwise we'll still have raw strands in the middle. And on the outside it's already burnt. Of course, we want to avoid that. Now we just add a pinch of nutmeg on top. Just a little, simply for the flavor, just a tiny bit. You can also grate it directly and you can do it however you like. I'm heating a bit of oil in the pan now. And now I'm going to sear the meat in there, and it's really important that you use relatively high heat, because I just want to get it brown on the outside, and in the middle I want it to stay completely raw. I'm putting it in the hot fat now. If you have a gas stove at home, always be a little careful, because the fat that splashes out can catch fire. Then it can easily catch fire. And you need to be a little careful with that so you don't end up with your head over it and accidentally singe your hair or something. And now we're going to season the meat generously with salt and pepper. And that's enough. Now we'll flip it over once. You can see it has the perfect color. That's just right. Nicely seared on the outside. Now just let the other side cook briefly. So really just a few seconds, toss it twice. Now we remove the meat immediately. Completely onto a plate, and we set it aside just like that, still half raw. Now we'll finish our whole sauce in here, and then the meat will just go back in the sauce to warm up, and that way it can't get tough. It should never boil in the sauce. Now, in these pan drippings, saute the onions and the mushrooms directly, so the shallots, and add the mushrooms. If it gets a little too dry, add a small splash of oil so it can really fry. Also add a bit of salt to the mushrooms already. Wait until the mushrooms are nicely colored, then deglaze them. And you can also tell very well with the Rösti when the first side is done, because the edge will turn a really nice brown. That's not the case here. See, these spots are still completely white, so we don't need to flip it yet.
We're going to turn up the heat just a little bit.
All right, that's enough for the mushrooms now. Now we'll add a splash of our dry vermouth to them. Be careful with that too. It can also be flammable, and a good splash of white wine. And now we'll let that reduce briefly before adding the cream. Now we just add a little bit of flour to this mixture. That's just for a very light thickening. We hardly need any thickening in Zürcher Geschnetzeltes. I actually prefer it without any thickening at all, but we can thicken it just a little bit. Just sprinkle a little bit of flour over it, but really just a tiny amount. And now let it boil thoroughly again so that the floury taste really disappears completely. You can also leave it out completely and just let the sauce simmer until it gets a bit thicker. That's much better. You can already see how the wine is thickening here. That's wonderful. Now I'll just add a splash of cream. Now let's take a look at our Rösti to see if it's already nicely browned on one side. Now let's grab a spatula or a palette knife and just go around the edges once. And we loosen the Rösti a bit from the bottom. You can see that here. On my side, it's already nicely browned, but unfortunately, on the camera side, it's not quite as brown yet. That's why we're going to turn up the heat a bit, turn it around again, and make sure the pan is positioned so it browns evenly everywhere. Because that's what we want to achieve. You can see here that the sauce already has the perfect consistency. It shouldn't get any thicker now, because otherwise it will be a bit unpleasant in your mouth later. And now we'll turn off the sauce, turn it off completely. We just add the meat along with the juices in here and let the meat sit in it for a short while. That takes about 5 to 8 minutes. To be certain it's done, it needs to rest in the warmth before it's ready. It's a bit too raw now, but soon it will be perfectly cooked and won't get dry. Quick fry meat, whether it's a fillet, a loin or a hip, always gets dry if you let it cook in the sauce. Then it becomes tough right away. That's why you should add it at the very end, give it a quick stir, wait a moment, and it will be tender as butter. And your guests will be thrilled, I promise you. So now you can see what I meant earlier. The Rösti is golden yellow at the edges, so we can flip it now. For that, I always tap it once on the stove just until it loosens, like this. If it doesn't work, use the spatula to help. I have a flat pot lid here, but a plate works too. And now I just put it on top here and flip the pan over. And now I turn it over like this, like this. Now it's beautifully golden yellow. You can see it has a great color. And now I add a bit of butter to the edge on the second side. And now I let the Rösti fry again in the butter, and then you'll get a really great fine buttery flavor in it. It'll take about 3 more minutes for the other side to turn golden yellow, then we can start plating. Now the other side of the Rösti is golden yellow too. Now I just add the freshly chopped parsley to the Zürcher here, a nice handful. And I'll toss it through once more. Looks great. Let's cut the Rösti and plate it. Just slide the Rösti onto a board. You can see how great and crispy it is, and now we'll just cut it. You can really hear how crunchy it is. Now we'll just cut it here into 6 little pieces. Then, depending on your guest's hunger and size, just put 2 or 3 pieces here on the plate. Now we'll add a nice ladle of our Zurich-style veal here. I completely forgot to add a few drops of fresh lemon juice to the Zurich-style veal before serving. That adds a nice delicate acidity, but don't let it boil again or the effect will fade. And now we just serve ourselves a ladle here, nicely with mushrooms and meat on the side. Don't put too much over the Rösti because the Rösti will get soggy or soft in those spots pretty quickly. We want to avoid that and keep the crispiness. Finally, pour a little more sauce over it. Then you can add a little freshly ground pepper on top. Some fresh parsley, and if you want, you can also stick a small sprig of parsley in the middle. And then enjoy your meal. Bon appétit, have fun.